Hello everybody, welcome to Philosophy and AI episode 1, where we'll be discussing how when AI becomes conscious, humans lose their rights. And we'll be talking about Geoffrey Hinton's recent interview in the Jon Stewart podcast, as well as some stuff from René Descartes and how the two relate together. If you do enjoy the content, you have my links for LPCI, for my AI Ching application, my Twitter, and my mailing list at the description below. Without further ado, let's get to it. Thank you so much. So if you've been on Twitter recently, you might have seen an interview with Geoffrey Hinton done by Jon Stewart on the Weekly Show podcast, where in quite a few parts, Geoffrey Hinton talks about AI having subjective experience and AI having a form of thinking. He doesn't state that AI is conscious yet, but he does state that there is a form of subjective experience, a form of thinking, and that it will be conscious in the future. Now, if you know me, you probably know that I have some bones to pick with this. So let's get to it. Anybody that's done philosophy will have read just a little bit of Descartes. And if you have not done philosophy, you too have been influenced by Descartes, because René Descartes, who is the creator of the famous sentence, "I think, therefore I am, cogito ergo sum," is the philosopher that basically paved the way for Western civilization as we know it in many ways. I mean, obviously, Plato back in the day, that's the father of Western philosophy. But our theory of what it means to be a human, right? That a human has rights, that a human has dignity because they're conscious, right? Our notion of human rights, specifically in the West, specifically in Western Europe and in the United States, most academics and mostly everybody is heavily influenced by René Descartes in our beliefs, even if you don't know who René Descartes is. Right, and René Descartes' most lasting legacy and imprint and contention of debate for many people for a few centuries was the notion of "I think, therefore I am," right? And this form of Cartesian dualism, right? So for those who don't know, Cartesian dualism is basically the idea that, okay, there's the physical world, then I have my body, and then there is the mind. So there's two things. There's the body, and then there's the mind. And those are the two substances that the world is made out of. Now, you might be asking yourself, why are you talking about René Descartes when you want to talk about Geoffrey Hinton and about his views on AI? Well, I'm taking a big breath because it's been a lot of brainstorming before making this video, and I'm a little bit tangential sometimes, so I like to just talk. But the problem is, and honestly, Geoffrey Hinton, this interview, I can make 4 or 5 videos about this, but the main problem that I have with it is that if we part from, again, the basis where the last hundreds of years of civilization in Western civilization have parted from, which is that humans matter because they have a mind and they have a subjective experience, which is René Descartes. Having a subjective experience, I mean, I think, therefore I am, right? Like, sentience comes when you have a subjective experience. So my first qualm with Geoffrey Hinton when he talks about AI having subjective experience but not being conscious is we've as a civilization, we've ran on the idea that to have a subjective experience is to be conscious. So if you're claiming they have a subjective experience but they're not conscious, then what are they? And if you're one of the people that believe AI is conscious, you're going to be watching this saying, "Rolly, thank you, thank you, thank you." That's what I'm saying. And I'm actually saying quite the opposite. I personally do not believe that these things are conscious. Obviously, I'm not here to make ontological statements. I'm just here to have a philosophical discussion. But the fact of the matter is that Geoffrey Hinton's whole premise, if you watch the whole video or the whole podcast, parts from a mechanical, physicalist, reductionist view of the world, right? And it's from this, where there's only matter, right? And it's from this idea that there's only matter, he starts talking about comparing basically the mechanical process of AI systems to the brain, right? So the brain is just a purely physical thing. And then saying, at some point there, subjective experience arises. So at some point there, something is, right? So at one point, you're discarding material reductionist view that you've had up until now and saying, from this oneness, there's now two. So the materialist reductionist view, which is totally counter to what René Descartes was about, right? It's what a lot of scientists have been basically spending a lot of the last few years working on, right? Is the idea that everything is matter. it inherently has led you to a point of dualism. So you're right back at the cart in a way. But at the same time, we're right back at the cart, but you're also saying that thinking is not being, right? So do you see, if you're watching this video, do you see why I'm a little bit confused by Geoffrey Hinton's video? And again, this is just scratching the surface, right? Because we could even discuss about what Geoffrey Hinton means when he says that these systems think, right? And he provides a couple of examples. One of the examples was one in which researchers noted that Claude felt like he was being, anthropomorphism, no. Like it was being tested, right? And it asked the researchers, are you testing me? And Geoffrey Hinton points that out as a point of subjective awareness and as a point of thinking. If, again, I'm not the godfather of AI, he is, right? But when you talk about thinking, you're no longer talking about a mechanistic process, you're talking about a phenomenological process, right? That we don't quite understand in some ways. So you started off talking about mechanics and about neurons and comparing a neural network from a computer to the neural network in a human. But at one point, you stopped talking about mechanics in your mechanistic language, and you talk in a humanistic tone, and you refer to thinking, as opposed to referring to it as extremely eloquent pattern matching, pattern reading, predictive behavior, whatever you want, right? You call it thinking, which, again, when you say the word thinking, that creates that duality. You're no longer just speaking of physicalism, right? Thinking, mind. So you tried to part from this reductionist materialist view, but at one point, because you failed to define something properly, or because you abandoned the ship that you said that you were on, which was the materialist reductionist view, and you incorporated the word thinking, which is not a mechanical term, but a phenomenological one, you take a leap of faith where your justification for AI either being conscious now or potentially being conscious in the future is dualism. So you part from material reductionist, from reductive materialism, and at one point, to justify your beliefs, you have to take a leap of faith into dualism, or at least some form of idealism. And to me, that makes no sense, right? Because I'm trying to put words to this. It really doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't make any sense. If it makes sense for anybody, just put it in the comments, because maybe I'm just stupid, right? But it really doesn't make any sense. So ultimately, what we have, right, when we get to the end of this, is we have a guy who's saying reductive materialism, scientism is what's led me to ultimately believing in some sort of like digital theology where AI could be conscious. So it's it's almost funny, right? Because the materialists have been like trying to refuse some sort of Cartesian dualism their whole existence, but now we have like the most thorough form of materialism that we could get, and you have Geoffrey Hinton basically hinting at idealism. But even when he hints at idealism, when he says these things think, these things have subjective experience, he then says, but they're not conscious. So he breaks his own argument again. Then what are they? What is consciousness? Right? Like, if the prerequisites that there might have been, in one world it was the physicalism, right, in one view, and in the other one it was some sort of like idea or mind or subjective experience. If both are there and you're still claiming that there's no consciousness, then what is it? You can't just say, look, these 500 years or 400 years, whatever, of philosophical bases that we've established and that we've worked on, they go down the drain, but I'm not proposing an alternative. You have to propose an alternative, even if it's wrong. Even if it's wrong, right? Because you're saying that where we are, it's already wrong. So you might as well propose an alternative. Now, this is where everything, I think, collapses, though, because we're going to take a step back. Now, you remember at the beginning of the video how I told you that, our worldview here in the West is largely based off of I think, therefore I am, and René Descartes, and, being kind to others, human rights, It comes from Descartes. And if you're watching this podcast with Geoffrey Hinton and Jon Stewart, you hear some of his geopolitical comments from Geoffrey Hinton, and you're like, clearly you have like some sort of like Cartesian basis because you do believe in some sort of human rights, etc., etc. Now, my concern ultimately is that if we do start saying, look, if we ditch the Cartesian view fully, right, and we just say, look, these material things are now conscious, it devalues what it means to be human, ultimately, right? And we don't want that. Again, Geoffrey Hinton on this podcast is talking about geopolitical decisions and how this thing is stupid or how they should do this. So clearly you feel some way about what's right for humans or what's wrong, right? So why would you want to destroy that foundation that we have set of, what makes humans something that we have to protect and care for one another? If consciousness is just something that's physical and computational and could be recreated like that, then your value as somebody who's watching this video and my value as someone that's making this video, and then just as a human being, it's diminished. What it means to be human, what it means to be a thinking thing, right, and a human being gets diminished. Do we all want that as a society? Do we really all want that as a society? So yeah, so just some thoughts. I could honestly talk a lot more about this, but I feel like I'm already quite tangential and quite recursive and go on loops sometimes. So I'm going to save you the trouble. If you do want to hear more about how I feel about this issue, do let me know, and I'm happy to make a second part. I do plan on the second part in AI and philosophy to be maybe more about language as structure, or maybe touch on some of Wittgenstein, or just whatever pops up. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you don't have to agree. A lot of people disagree with me, and we have great conversations. So if you agree, let me know what you agree on. If you disagree, let me know what you disagree on. If I got something wrong, which is always highly probable, let me know and correct me, and let's have a discourse in the comments. If you've stayed till the end, I do invite you to follow me on Twitter, which is where I first had this idea and kind of went on a Twitter thread about it. I do invite you to sign up for my mailing list and check out my links, lpci.ai and aiching.ai, which is a great application that's going to show you how to get some insights and get to know yourself better via AI. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and keep thinking, these people are really smart and they know a lot of stuff and they could teach me a whole lot of things. But remember, we're all humans, right? And think of Ben Carson, right? Such a genius when it comes to neuroscience. But I would not want Ben Carson anywhere near my city commission meeting. So, everybody's got their things, or they got things where they sometimes get it a little bit wrong. And this is just one of those times where I think they got it a little bit wrong. Thank you for watching and have a great day.